In a moment that perhaps only a small handful of Americans have asked for, former Vice President Mike Pence is officially running for president, setting up an inevitably anticlimactic clash between him and his former running mate, Donald Trump. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is also expected to join the race. However, New Hampshire Governor Sununu told CNN's Dana Bash that he will not be following suit. Let's watch.
We've taken the last 6 months to really kind of look at things, where everything is, and I've made the decision not to run for president on the Republican ticket in 2024. And obviously a lot goes into that decision, but it's been quite an adventure, but not the end of the adventure by any means.
Sununu, a no-no on running for president. Later in that interview, he says what is a very astute observation is that, like, look, I don't want Trump to be the nominee again, and I feel like we're just going to be splitting the anti-Trump vote at this point, which, yeah, he should have a conversation with Chris Christie about that. And also, frankly, Mike Pence, who, look, has wanted to run for president for a long time, was up until January 5th a very plausible successor to Donald Trump as the Republican standard bearer. But A, Donald Trump is not actually going away, so he's not handing the baton off to anyone. And B, Mike Pence has absolutely zero credibility, none whatsoever. It would be hard to find a major Republican figure with less credibility with the Republican base than Mike Pence. There would be more Democrats voting for Mike.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously not in the Republican primary.
It is interesting. Let me just steelman this a little bit. There is an argument that having certain candidates in the race can help to clear the way for some of Trump's opponents by drawing heat and making attacks that maybe the front runners shouldn't be making. So, for example, there was this moment in the very crowded Democratic primary field in 2020 where Tulsi Gabbard was not very successful, but she really kneecapped Kamala Harris, and that was the beginning of the end of her campaign when she called her out on flip-flopping on Joe Biden's record on busing and integration. There was another moment where Elizabeth Warren, who also failed to win a single state, did have some impact toward the end of the race when she basically knocked Bloomberg out of the running by getting him on some of this Me Too stuff. So, do you think there's a possibility that someone like Mike Pence, because of his track record with evangelicals, say, or someone like Chris Christie, who can be somewhat more bombastic than others, like Mike Pence, maybe can hit Donald Trump on some of his personal bad behavior kind of things, can be useful insofar as that they can get the attack out there and then recede from view?
Use the words bombastic and Mike Pence in the same sentence, right?
Chris Christie is bombastic in a way that Mike Pence isn't.
Thinks he is.
And can arguably take a hit at Donald Trump, and even if Donald Trump hits back and it hurts Chris Christie, at least DeSantis doesn't have to get his hands dirty and the claim is out there.
DeSantis needs to get his hands dirty. This has never worked. The whole go after Trump thing. It just doesn't. It didn't work. It really much did not happen in 2016. What happened in 2016 is that 14, 15, 16 people ran in this Republican primary, and Donald Trump entered it with like a quarter of the support, maybe more, of the Republican primary electorate, and the rest of it was fractured amongst a million people, and that remained the situation, and so he ran away with it. The more people get in, the more you're likely, I think, just to repeat that dynamic. And also, Mike Pence doesn't have he is known to Republicans as the guy who, there's a perception of a lack of toughness. Now, you can say that what he did was very brave and should be celebrated. He stood up to Trump. He said, no, Biden has won the election. What you're asking me to do is something I can't do. And if he'd been celebrated by conservative media for that, and they had stuck by him, we might be in a different situation. But the reality is no one in conservative media stuck by him, except for Bulwark, Dispatch type people who aren't really operating actually in conservative media world. Conservative media and primary voters and everyone hates what he did. Hates it.
Yeah, so
there's nothing for him.
Yeah, I think Mike Pence, it's hard to see a path, but I think the argument that I'm making is something different. If people stayed in the race until through the primaries, then they would be damaging. Obviously, they would be splitting the vote. If you get out before the primaries, even meaningfully before the primaries, then you're no longer splitting the vote. So again, what happened in 2020 on the Democrat side was that there was, they allowed there to be a wide open field. 16, I think it got up to in the 20s. There were people Patrick Duvall, people, you forgot were even running, who had thrown their hat in the ring. But when push came to shove, when Obama picked up the call and called the Democratic primary candidates, they all dropped out in enough time for Joe Biden to consolidate the votes behind him. So again, there's this question of whether or not it is useful to other non-Trump candidates to have some people raising concerns. There was a clip going around of Tim Scott getting to some back and forth on The View, raising conservative issues, perhaps running for vice president, but regardless, making space for a different kind of conservative candidate in a liberal sphere, a space that Donald Trump would never enter into, in a way that might help normalize the idea of a more normal kind of Republican candidate. Is this something that the Republicans should think of as a strategic advantage at this time?
Honestly, this is going to be weird to say, but it makes more sense for Tim Scott to run than Mike Pence, because somebody does have to be the VP. I think for people like Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, essentially what they're doing is VP auditions, and either of them are somewhat plausible. I think Tim Scott is a very plausible VP pick for whoever ends up being the nominee, so I can see why he's doing it. I don't think Mike Pence is realistically going to be in contention to be VP, because Trump is not going to pick him to be VP.
Right.
And it would be sort of weird to have the VP again also be a VP again, not be the main candidate. Maybe they cut some kind of deal. I don't know. I don't know if that's what DeSantis is interested in. It just seems to me ultimately like it's not going to be that I don't think his candidacy is going to make much of a splash whatsoever. If it is making a splash, it's probably splitting the vote a little bit for DeSantis. Maybe that won't matter if he gets out early, if he endorses DeSantis. I think that would be important. That would probably be what he can do if what he cares about is stopping Trump from being the nominee again.
Yeah, well,
and it all might come short. But and then we had some other candidate news we wanted to get to.
Yes, there's not only Republicans throwing their hat in the ring. Cornel West announced he's running for president as part of the People's Party. Yeah, so he announced just maybe half an hour ago or so on Twitter. He put out a campaign video saying that he's fighting for the people's interest. I think we have a clip of it now.
Well,
we can take a look.
In these bleak times, I have decided to run for truth and justice, which takes the form of running for president of the United States as a candidate for the People's Party. I enter into quest for truth. I enter into quest for justice. And the presidency is just one vehicle to pursue that truth and justice, what I've been trying to do all of my life.
It's nice to see a young man get into the Democratic race.
Yeah, we were joking off camera that at 70 years old, he's part of the young flank of announced Democratic candidates as opposed to Trump and Biden. Look, what do you make of this? Do you think there's room here?
I don't know. I find Cornel West to be an affable guy who has done very principled things on free speech. That's, obviously I'm not on the left, so I don't agree with a lot of his policy prescriptions on probably criminal justice, and that was some of the criminal justice stuff.
I think he would agree.
Very much not the economic stuff, but he's a great commentator. I've enjoyed watching him and he's willing to have conversations with anyone. I think that's a big thing that people appreciate about him. I've seen him on like Sean Hannity's show of all places, and he engages in such a friendly way. He calls everybody brother. He has this kind of let's create a family and a fellowship and try to get to the bottom of our disagreements in a polite way. And he has made very courageous stances on free speech, on defending the rights for people that whose views he probably utterly thinks are odious, disagree with, signed statements on behalf of canceled people. So I have huge respect to the man, very much so.
And he has been very critical of Barack Obama in ways that hurt his professional career in academia, and has been willing to be critical of Joe Biden in the way that very few others have done in this space. He has been singularly focused on economic justice in a way that I think makes people trust him, even if they don't necessarily agree with the ways that he plans to improve the economic fate of so many Americans. People felt this way about Bernie, too. Folks who were like small government people looked at Bernie and said, well, even if I don't agree with how he's doing it, I appreciate that there's someone who's trying to fight in my corner corner to make life better for me and not just the 1% and the elites in this country. So I'd be curious to learn more about what it means for him to be running as part of the People's Party. Is this the traditional People's Party or this newer party that was started a few years ago after 2020 by Nick Briahna that has had some controversy attached to it? Does this mean that he's running kind of independently outside of the primary context, or is this kind of a labeling that he's going to run as a Democrat technically? There's a lot to be discussed, and that has a lot of strategic implications for how this vote goes down.
But he elevates every debate he's a part of, so I'm glad to see him tossing his hat in the race.
As am I. All right, we'll have more Rising for you right after this.